Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, knew he needed America's help. His country was at war, Russia had invaded, cities were being bombed, people were dying. Zelensky had spoken to many US officials, but he believed only one man could truly make a difference: Donald Trump, the former US president. Zelensky wanted to speak to Trump directly. He felt that bypassing advisors and speaking one-on-one was crucial. He needed Trump to understand the dire situation in Ukraine. He needed continued US support, especially military aid. The US had already given billions, but the war was far from over. Zelensky was not naive. He knew Trump had a reputation for being unpredictable. He knew Trump had once been friendly with Putin, the Russian president, but Zelensky was desperate. He was willing to try anything to end the bloodshed and save his country. He hoped that Trump, with his deal-making skills, could find a way to bring peace. The world watched and waited. Could these two men, so different in background and style, find common ground? Could they work together to end a war that threatened not just Ukraine but the stability of Europe and the world? Zelensky could only hope. The fate of his nation hung in the balance. In September 2024, a glimmer of hope emerged. Zelensky and Trump met face-to-face in New York. The meeting was described as warm, good, constructive. It was a start. Both sides agreed to further dialogue. Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, was tasked with continuing the conversation. He was scheduled to meet with Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. Kellogg was a retired U.S. Army lieutenant general. He was known to support a ceasefire and peace talks. He also believed in providing security guarantees for Ukraine. Then, in February 2025, another meeting took place. Senior Trump advisors met with Zelensky on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. This delegation included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and, once again, Keith Kellogg. The diplomatic dance continued. Every meeting, every conversation was a step towards peace. Or so it seemed. But behind the handshakes and diplomatic pleasantries, doubts lingered. Could Trump be trusted? Would he really prioritize Ukraine's needs? And even if he did, was there anything he could do to sway Putin, a man notorious for his intransigence? Trump had campaigned on a promise. He pledged to end the Ukraine war quickly. He criticized the financial burden on America. He suggested that European nations should contribute more, and he had a plan, a deal. Trump's proposal was simple: continued U.S. aid in exchange for access to Ukraine's resources. This included rare earth minerals, oil, and other valuable commodities. It was a money-for-minerals deal. Negotiations were ongoing. This proposal sparked controversy. Some saw it as pragmatic, a way to secure U.S. interests while helping Ukraine. Others criticized it as exploitative, taking advantage of a nation in dire straits. They argued that it prioritized profit over people, reducing a complex geopolitical crisis to a mere business transaction. The world held its breath. Would this deal bring peace? Or would it simply prolong the conflict, turning Ukraine into a pawn in a larger geopolitical game? Only time would tell. Section 4. The Bear's Shadow. Looming over all these negotiations was the imposing figure of Vladimir Putin. Zelensky maintained that Putin was not interested in peace. He believed Putin was determined to crush Ukraine, to erase its independence, to absorb it back into a Russian sphere of influence. Putin's actions seemed to support this grim assessment. Russia escalated its attacks. Non-nuclear ballistic missiles rained down on Ukraine, plunging millions into darkness. Putin threatened even more devastating strikes. Drones buzzed over Kyiv and other cities, sowing terror and destruction. Putin's message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. He seemed unmoved by international condemnation, economic sanctions, or the plight of Ukrainian civilians. The bear had tasted blood, and it was hungry for more. The world watched in horror. The specter of a wider war, a conflict that could engulf all of Europe, loomed large. The hope for a negotiated settlement seemed to dwindle with every passing day. Section 5. A fight for survival. Despite the odds, Zelensky refused to give up. He pleaded for more military aid from the US and its allies. He needed weapons, ammunition, and most importantly, fighter jets. He warned of manpower shortages, hinting at the possibility of lowering the conscription age. The situation was becoming desperate. Zelensky feared the worst: losing the war, seeing his country occupied, his people subjugated. He believed that Ukraine's only hope for long-term security lay in joining NATO, the Western military alliance. He argued that this would deter further Russian aggression. However, he acknowledged the constitutional constraints that prevented Ukraine from ceding territory to Russia in exchange for membership. Zelensky knew he was walking a tightrope. He had to balance his desperate need for US support with the need to protect Ukraine's sovereignty. He had to project strength while acknowledging his country's vulnerability. He had to negotiate with Trump while trying to predict the unpredictable. The world watched, holding its breath. Could Zelensky, the comedian-turned-wartime leader, pull off the impossible? Could he secure peace for his people, preserve his nation's independence, and defy the Russian bear? The answer, as always, lay shrouded in the fog of war.